Welcome to the Ontario College of Teachers 2019 Annual Meeting of Members. My name is Laurie Luckenach, and I'm one of the presiding officers for the College of Teachers Council meetings. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Métis, and Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations. Tonight's theme is about students' mental health. More specifically, about Ontario certified teachers, how Ontario certified teachers can support mental health concerns. You probably heard that the college has a new advisory for OCTs on how to support students with mental health issues. Did you know that 1 in 5 students experience a mental health problem? In a few minutes, you will hear from our medical professional and student panel as they discuss best practices on how to support students. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone about our question and answer session that will follow presentations by Council Chair, Deputy Registrar, and selection of committees. If you have a question, please write it down and place it in one of the many drop boxes around the room. We will be collecting these questions throughout the evening. Today's meeting is also being live streamed over the internet. For those at home, you can submit questions by visiting pollev, that's polev.com/OCTOEEO. Before we begin, I would like to introduce you to your college council. It is made up of 23 members of the college elected by their peers and 14 members of the public appointed by the government. Together, they develop and approve policies that regulate the teaching profession in Ontario. Please, when I read your name, for those who are in attendance, I invite you to stand. Charles Dimitri Abraham, Diane Ballantyne, Paige Bennett, Jean-Luc Bernard, Bob Cooper, Chantal Cote, Irene Dembick, Elizabeth Edgar Webkamagad, Susan E. Elliott Johns, Rebecca Fort, Melissa Gaffin, Tim Gernstein, Aaron Glenn, Mary Ellen Gucciardi, John Hamilton, Godwin Ifedi, Jacqueline Karsmeyer, Colleen Landers, Shannon Marcus, Marlene Marois, Michelle Miner-Seal, Marianne Muwad, Sarah Nuini, Alicia Nunn, Jerry O'Reilly, Tom Potter, Nicola Pawadiak, Vincent Rinaldo, Jonathan Rose, Stefan Valet, Nicole Van Moodenberg, and Stephen Zimmerman. So that's your council. Thank you, council members. So let me ask you this. How do you think members of the profession can support students at risk? What are some of the characteristics to look for? For the next 40 minutes, we will answer some of these questions. I would like to introduce you to our Deputy Registrar, Joe Jameson, and our Chair of Council, Nicole Van Woudenberg, who will lead the discussion. Please give them a warm welcome.
Good evening, everyone. The spectrum of mental illness covers students from all backgrounds and across all grade levels. In Canada, it's estimated that 1.2 million children and youth are affected by mental illness. Yes, less than 20% receive treatment. 70% of mental health problems start developing during childhood or adolescence. As part of Ontario's teaching profession's ethics and practices, it is our role to support students' mental health the best we can. Teachers are often the first ones to notice behavioral changes in their students, which puts them in a unique position to be able to help students with mental health concerns get the help that they need. It is also about promoting wellness and avoiding stigma and avoiding misunderstanding. While teachers aren't expected to diagnose, as we've said in our latest professional advisory, we provide advice to them on ways they can support students at risk by knowing what to look for, who to report it to, and where to find resources. We're all familiar with the quote, "It takes a village," but when it comes to supporting students at risk of mental health issues, that phrase really does apply. Here with us today is a small gathering, a sampling of that village, a compendium of professionals and peers who support students' mental health on a daily basis. So it is first my pleasure to welcome Dr. Amy Chung. Amy is an associate scientist, evaluative clinical sciences in the Hurvitz Brain Sciences Research Program at the Sunnybrook Research Institute. And Amy is also an associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Toronto. She works clinically as a psychiatrist with young people with mood and anxiety disorders and with their families. Dr. Chung's research focus includes adolescent depression and community-based service delivery models for youth with mental illness. She currently leads a North American collaborative examining barriers to the appropriate diagnosis and treatment of adolescent depression in a primary care setting, which includes disseminating depression management guidelines that are endorsed by the American Academy of Pediatrics. Please welcome with me, Dr. Chung.
So next I would like to welcome Andrea-Ann Fleck, a social worker and implementation coach at the School Mental Health Ontario, a provincial implementation team designed to support Ontario school districts to enhance the mental health and well-being for all students. Andrea-Ann has acquired over 20 years of experience working in community, private, and school-based settings, providing direct service and advocating for child and youth mental health. At SMH Ontario, Andrea-Ann provides coaching support and leads the equity and mental health portfolio in collaboration with various stakeholders and system leaders across the province. Also here today is Ontario certified teacher Susie Barad. Susie is a grade 7 teacher and curriculum leader of wellness, inclusion, and social justice at Valley Park Middle School in Toronto. She is also on the program development team for Operation Prefrontal Cortex, a nonprofit that is piloting a mediation program in the Toronto District School Board. Last year, she chaired the committee that published Grab and Go Mindfulness for the Busy Teacher, a how-to guide for teachers to implement meditation and mindfulness into the classroom. Susie is currently training to become a smart education, stress management and resiliency training facilitator who will train educators, professional support staff, parents, caregivers, and students so that they can better support students' mental health. And last but not least, we have grade 12 student Alan Liu. He is extremely passionate about the significance of mental health, student empowerment, equity of learning resources, and inclusivity to opportunities for all students. In addition to these issues, he also recognizes and supports the importance of incorporating relevant technology in today's education. While the youngest member on our panel, Alan is no less accomplished. Alan is a student trustee, a long-serving member on his student council, an air cadet, a member of the Prime Leaders Youth Collaborative Youth Council, and a regular volunteer for the Richmond Hill Public Library. In his rare moments of spare time, he enjoys swimming, aviation, music, and video games. Please put your hands together to welcome our panel.
So the next while, the focus will be on the wisdom and the experience that the panel brings here. So Nicole and I are going to stay way over here. I think this is stage left that we're at right now. And we really want the focus to be on you. So we'll ask some questions, we'll sit down, and we'll let you take the stage. So the first question we have is for everyone. And the question is this. Lots of students become depressed and have trouble focusing, and they act out now and then. How do you know that those behaviors are not just a normal part of growing up and may be a sign of a mental health concern? When do the behaviors go from something that is something we would consider all a part of growing up, and where should that inner sense go on and say, maybe there's something here? Amy, would you like to start, please?
Sure. I think that most students who are struggling, that you identify as struggling in your classroom, the red flag really for you is if their functioning is impaired. And when I say functioning, it can be in many different domains, starting with schoolwork, so with their learning, if they're struggling with learning, or if they're struggling with their friendships, or they're struggling with their relationships at home or with other adults. I think that's really a red flag for you. Don't forget also that all of you are experts in children and adolescents because you work with them every day. And so if you have a concern about a young person or a child, then don't forget that you're not alone in this process and that there's lots of backup for you. There's a lot of experts in your community, in your school community, that you can ask questions to figure out if this child or adolescent is struggling with what is a normal problem of adolescence or childhood, or whether it is something that you should be more concerned about.
Andreanne, please.
So what she said sounds about right. I think, I mean, in this case, you know, we're talking about trying to identify whether a student is you know, going through natural or normal developmental stages, or is being faced with, you know, something more serious like depression. We don't really know. Right? As educators, we're not expected to know either. I put myself in that pool, given the fact that I've been working with schools for so long. But we don't actually know. And so our role is to recognize, you know, those early signs of possible dysfunction, as Amy mentioned, but also to know that you know, we need to look further. We need to ask more questions. And we need to investigate in a way that is very natural for us in the school. So asking the student, you know, how are things going? What seems to be, you know, happening? I've noticed X, Y, and Z. And just knowing that can be very, very helpful and powerful for students. But certainly knowing who to turn to get more help, and knowing who else to talk to about it is very significant. So my answer is we don't know, right? So let's find ways to investigate a little bit better. Let's have some tools to know a little bit more about what is depression and what can it look like in students. But certainly there's no expectation to be the person who is going to distinguish whether or not your student is depressed or just meeting some, you know, developmental milestones.
I was gonna say the same thing, and we're so on the same page. This is fantastic. We need to ask more questions. I think too, as teachers, we get so busy. Our plates are so overloaded, and we need to just take more time instead of jumping to conclusions, because it's so easy to do. Well, they didn't do their homework again. Well, I remember one situation where I had a student and he didn't do his homework again. And I was just in the moment of frustration in the middle of your day, you know, you react and you want to punish or give consequences. And he was sitting with me, and then he just, at the end of the day, and he just broke down. I'm like, why are you crying? And, you know, he just said, he's like, my uncle died. And then I was like, well, what happened? And then he dug deeper, because our school is in Flemington and Thorncliffe. We have a high immigration status of children and a lot of refugees, and he said, you know, we just found out that he was trying to help a homeless boy in Afghanistan, and the rebels came and shot him. So you have a 12, 13-year-old boy who is dealing with such a traumatic issue, and even though he's not in the same country, this is the conversations that he's hearing at home. And if we don't take the time to sit and ask these questions, to dig a little deeper, because we have to remember these teenagers too, they don't, especially if they have big problems, they are not going to share with an adult. What's my teacher gonna do? But if we just take the time to sit and ask a few more questions very sensitively and show them that we're here to listen without judgment, without consequence, they start to open up. And I think we need to remember as well is to ask, it doesn't have to be all at that one moment. Ask a little bit, wait a few days, ask again, and they start to develop that trust and realize that we have concern for this. And once they know that we care and they see that they matter and that they are heard, I think those lines of communication open to where then we can make that judgment at, this is too far for me to go, this is where we need to seek, social services or psychiatric help, but at least you find out and can be more equipped in order to guide them towards the right direction.
Alan, please.
All right, wow. Would it hurt to say that I want to echo the exact same? No, but I think what, as everybody else has said before, it's quite difficult to identify how youth express signs of mental health concern, right? Because everybody is different and everybody will be expressing it differently. Some people will be more expressive of that and other people will be more withdrawn. I think for some people, from my experience, from the student perspective, maybe a little bit more towards the high school experience, there are some things that students worry about that, adults might not think that we worry about. I know for me and a lot of the people that I've reached out to through my work as a student trustee and across the province, there are a lot of issues right now that students are very concerned about, such as tuition, competitiveness of getting into university, and even after all that, finding a job. Affordable housing, right? Believe it or not, these are things that students, especially later on in high school, they're thinking about. Again, not all students are the same. Some students might not be thinking that far ahead. But again, everybody, I am pretty sure all students have been asked the question, what do you want to do in the future, right? That's a question that will lead to pondering, hey, if I go down this path, what will my life look like, right? And that's where it opens doors to bigger issues that students might be concerned about. So I think just like Susie said, having the conversations and not judging them and really not having any expectation, or not expectations, but just being open to any ideas that might be on their minds, because you never know what people are going through. So I think those are just some really important considerations that teachers should be looking out for students.
Can I add to that, actually?
Absolutely.
So it's funny, you were saying how you're worried about potential of the housing market or where you're going to live and everything afterwards. And I work with the middle school grades, and I have this little girl who, her parents are going through marital issues, and they are already live demographically in poverty, and they have 4 children living in a 2-bedroom apartment, a newborn baby, and the parents are fighting. So very quickly, her grades have dropped. She's not focusing and able to concentrate or do her homework. And, when I asked her more questions, she was also concerned about that. She goes, if my mom leaves my dad, what's going to happen to us? Where are we going to go? How is she going to do it? And she confided in me that it keeps her up at night as well. So this is a concern not only for high school kids moving on their own, it's kids who are worried about how their parents are going to do it. And these are, and it might not be depression, but it's moments of angst, it's moments of anxiety that if we catch it early enough and put in preventative strategies, we can then stop it from excelling and give them the tools before it becomes clinical.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for those thoughtful responses. I'm wondering, what are some of the barriers that we, the collective we, have to overcome in order to support students' mental health? And maybe we can start with Andrea.
Oh, sure. I can't echo anybody else right now, so I'll have to come up with an original response. So the collective we, yes, that's you, that's me, that's all of us here, including all 72 school boards, private school, everybody, right? It includes everybody. And I think the first thing is to start talking about mental health. right? That's one of the barriers, is that we're not talking about it in a way that's healthy. We're afraid. We've got language that stigmatizes, and we also have a lot of preconceived ideas about, you know, what mental illness is, and how it can impact certain, well, students or anybody for that matter. So I think, you know, as a collective, we have to be very, very conscientious about the language that we're using, you know, we're also here as adults modeling what we're looking for in our students and our young people. So, you know, how I deal with my mental health is certainly going to affect, you know, whether or not my children will be able to deal with certain issues and things that come up in their lives. So I think, yes, as a collective, we have to talk about mental health, just as we might physical health, right? Mental health is part of overall health. It's part of our global health. And so it's not, you know, way over there. It's not, you know, mental health is over there and education is over here. It's a combined effort. It's interconnected, and one cannot happen without the other. If we're not well, if we're not thinking about building those skills to help us be mentally healthy, just as we build skills to be physically healthy, then we're going to deal with some difficulties, and we're going to have a hard time moving forward. So yes, the first barrier is talking about it and really thinking about how we're stigmatizing mental illness in general. You know, I'm thinking of just one example. You know, there are people, adults, who do struggle with their mental health and sometimes have to take some time off work, right? We know all about that. They take some sick leave. Well, instead of saying, you know, so-and-so is on a mental health leave, where, you know, there's all kinds of stigma and funny ideas that come up, they're on a sick leave, right? Just as somebody who might be on a physical illness leave. So I think we have to be very, very conscientious about language that we're using.
Susie, would you like to?
Oh, yeah, sure. I actually had stigma at the top of my list. This is amazing. I agree with the language. I think the language that we also have to be very careful of and correct every time we hear it with the students is the talk of, you're crazy, you're nuts, right? You're too sensitive, stop thinking that way, you know, that's mental. All of that language contributes to the emotional state of the children. And at the end of the day, also, the teachers need training. And it's not just paper that's pushed at us or those emails that get ignored, because we got lots of those. There are resources everywhere, but there comes to a point the best way to get the teachers trained is human connectivity. Just the way that we don't teach children through, like, you don't spend the day on YouTube, hopefully not, most teachers. you know, and just, we learn better when we are face to face, when humans connect, and they even show, and I hope the doctor agrees with me, what I understand is that, you know, the child's brain develops in a much better way when you are learning face to face. So teachers need that too, and once the teachers are trained to know what to do, learn the signals, what do we say? How do we understand our own emotions? When you understand yourself, you can then translate it to the ones around you. So that, for me, is a huge factor, huge barrier.
Do you want to contribute to any other barriers you might see, Alan?
Yes, actually. So last time I was here, I touched on something that I've worked with Andriane for, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. I think the first or the biggest barrier that we want to look at is just improving the quantity and the quality of the resources for supporting students' mental health in schools. So what I mentioned last time is, if we take a look at the status quo, some of the things that the resources that students have available to them, we're just going to move from external organizations to inside the classroom. So if we look at outside of the school, we have Kids Help Phone, and we have all these online resources where students can reach out to. However, the issue with that is that for students, from the student perspective, it's like, I don't know who's on the other side of this chat room or the phone. What makes me think that this is going to be a comfortable person to talk to, someone who who's safe and will address my issues, right? So although these are fantastic resources, students right now, especially when you're going through mental health difficulties, you're at your lowest point, you're not the one who wants to take the risks, right? You really need that support to come find you. And moving on from external organizations, inside schools, we have both teachers in classrooms and as well as guidance counselors. One thing with guidance counselors right now, from what I've seen, there's no set outline of what guidance counselors are supposed to do. Just talking to my fellow student trustees from the Ontario Student Trustees Association, we actually had our AGM last weekend. Guidance counselors was a huge topic that we talked about. Guidance counselors from one school board or even one school to another can be doing completely different tasks. And it all boils down to they're doing some sort of, it begins with academic planning. You know, you're doing your course selection, and after that's done, you move on to post-secondary pathways planning, right? That's planning for college, university, or even an apprenticeship or skilled trades. And third, but not in order of priority, what it seems to be is mental health support and support for student well-being. And for some schools that have very high populations, I know my school is 1,800 students. We're not seeing enough resources in terms of guidance counselors to students. The ratio of guidance counselors to students right now can anywhere be between 300 to 400 for students for one guidance counselor. And what that means is you're booking a guidance counselor appointment 2 weeks in advance for a 15-minute sit down, and at the end of the 15 minutes, you're just like, okay, love to talk more, book another appointment, we'll see you in a month, right? That's not really effective with such a high ratio. There's no way you can build that relationship with your guidance counselor to be comfortable in sharing with them, right? So that's the result of, you know, both the extremely high ratio of students to a guidance counselor, and as well as just the order of priorities for a guidance counselor, right? Again, academic planning, post-secondary pathways, those come first because those are what guidance is traditionally known for. And next we see teachers in schools, right? Teachers in classrooms, obviously, you guys are the ones who are most likely able to recognize when students aren't the way they're used to behaving, right? You guys are the first people who are able to see something is wrong and be the first point of intervention. However, what we're seeing with students is that students aren't the ones with teachers in their own classrooms, let's say in a course, especially in high school, right? The dynamic between the teacher and the student it's not too helpful in allowing the student to want to reach out to the teacher, because especially if you're thinking about post-secondary pathways, your teacher is the one who is giving you a mark or is evaluating you on your performance. And although it most likely isn't the case, what students perceive, especially when you're in a low point, is that you're afraid that if you go tell your teacher, then your teacher is going to go talk to a guidance counselor who might then talk to your parents, or it might have an impact on your academic evaluation, and that might just make your issues even worse. So that cycle, although again it might not be true, that's what the students are perceiving. So what we're looking to see is we're hoping to try to expand the role of social workers in schools. That's what I've been working with Andrea Ann for, and what we've actually been seeing. So I've talked to a lot of social workers in schools as well, both in my board and in other boards. What we're seeing is so I have a statistic to throw out at you guys. In 2015, there was one social worker for 2 high schools and 9 elementary schools. So that was the funding that board had allocated for in terms of social worker ratio to students, right? So that's crazy. That's what, 11? Was it 9 elementary schools? Yeah, it was 9 elementary schools and 2 high schools. That's 11 schools. And that social worker was seeing 150 cases. So what that means is with 11 schools, you're not going to make it back to the same school within even 2 weeks of school weeks, right? So that's, again, the response time for meeting students with a social worker it's too long. But I'm happy to say that now in 2019, I talked to that same social worker again, and she said that now she's at approximately 2 high schools for 3 elementary schools, so it's a lot better. However, her number of cases hasn't changed. She's still sitting at 150 cases. And when I dug further into that, like, how can that be? If the number of schools is decreasing, how do you still have the same number of cases? Well, what she said to me was, so the way I get referrals is it's not students who can approach me, it's referrals from the guidance or the administration. And what that means is they all know that this social worker only has so much time, and it just becomes a kind of a case of triage, right? Who needs social support or mental health support the most? They're the ones who get to see the social worker, right? And if there's not enough time with the social worker, then sorry, you're gonna have to come back and wait until there's space, right? So that's really not helpful, because students undergoing mental health issues don't get to see a social worker until they're beyond the point of crisis, right? They've already gone past that that crisis point, that low point, and that's the point where they're deemed able and qualified to go see a social worker. So I think if we can increase the ratio of social workers to students, then that would be able to kind of alleviate that and be more proactive rather than reactive in terms of addressing this issue. And that's, sorry for, yeah, that's what I think the biggest barrier.
Thank you. And Dr. Chung, any other barriers that you want to highlight?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with the two key points, which is stigma and education, and then, of course, on top of education, resources. We can only overcome stigma when we are educated. The one word that I can think of when I think about overcoming these barriers is actually courage. Our students need to have courage to be able to share with you what they're struggling with. Alan is worried about his grades when he shares about his mental health concerns with his teacher. He's being very courageous. And when you ask a student about whether they think life is worth living, you're being very courageous because you are thinking, I'm really scared if they say yes, and what am I going to do? And I think that's where education really comes into play. If you know who your backups are, and you're educated and you know what to do in time of a crisis, then you are going to be able to be more courageous when you're talking to your students about what is actually going on with them.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, can I just add in one quick thing? In the sense of being courageous, I think what students are doing right now, I think steps are being made. However, it's not enough, and social workers can be the solution to this. But what students are doing is, it's not the classroom teachers that are the ones that will be the first ones to be approached. It's actually in high schools, teachers who are running extracurriculars, sports teams, or clubs, because there is that distance between academics and personal life, right? So I think teachers who are active in those areas, if you guys are able to encourage students, that would be the best way that we're seeing right now for students to talk to teachers about that and how they can self-identify themselves as in need of mental health support.
I think that as well. And mindfulness, meditation, we know that it works. How do you calm these things down? How do you give these children who are so overloaded with mental angst a brain break? Simple as that. How do you kind of teach them to stop the ruminating thought process? How do you teach them to just kind of be calm before that huge test? And I think that's something that every teacher can do in the classroom. I've implemented it myself, and it is a dramatic change, and it takes a couple minutes every day. And it's something that can be filtered throughout the classroom. So creating a very mindful classroom creates a very engaging and open and welcoming environment that then makes students feel safe and gives them, I think, courage.
Thank you. And Alan, this one's just for you.
Okay.
Well, while we have you on the spot. And I'm going to try to build on one of your earlier answers.
Sure.
So it's not exactly as the question that you have, just to throw a curveball at you.
Yeah, okay.
Earlier, you pointed out so wonderfully that there's a challenge for students around first accessibility to even get to a guidance counselor or a chaplain in a Catholic school or an identified teacher.
Yes.
And then once the accessibility barrier is done, then it's the time, 15 minutes, and I'll see you in a month. So the advisory, as you know, was written for every Ontario certified teacher. And that spirit puts the onus on all of us who are members of the college, not just specific roles, to be aware of and to support students' mental health.
Yes.
So the question is, to narrow it down, among teachers in general, what do you think students are looking for as far as traits or as far as professional practices that would give students the permission or the idea or the invitation to talk about their concerns? What is it you're looking for in teachers?
Just off of the top of my head, I think number one, just being friendly and open. Different classrooms have different environments or different kind of, the feeling that you get when you're in that classroom is different from class to class, teacher to teacher. And I think just from my personal experience and from what I've heard from other people, other students in the past, is that a classroom with a friendly environment where the teacher isn't, I'm wrong, you're wrong, I'm right, rather it's not that, but actually we have a dispute, let's discuss who is wrong, perhaps I'm wrong, and just really approaching the students from a level where, especially in high school, I'm talking more from the high school perspective, but if teachers approach students not from a top-down approach, but sort of at the same level where everybody's learning from each other, I think that's where students are able to perceive the teachers as, this is someone who is willing to talk to me, is somebody who's going to be open, and is not somebody who's going to just brush it off or say, I can't deal with this or something like that, right? So by having that level playing field or level relationship, that helps to make students more open and willing to talk to teachers.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks, Alan. And Dr. Chung, this one's for you. In your opinion, what are some of the best ways to work with professionals in supporting students' mental health?
Yeah, I think as we started the meeting, it really does take a village to raise a child. And we all work together, so professionals, and that could include myself, social workers, teachers, students, as well as their families. And so I think we all need to work together, and one of the key pieces of that is communication. And I think often there is very little communication between the healthcare system and the education system. I admit I'm a doctor, so it can be hard to reach me, so I know it's definitely not easy. But I can tell you that the best plans that we've been able to develop for students who are in need is when I'm able to communicate directly with his teachers or his guidance counselor or his vice principal, as well as their family. Communication for me, with my patient is also really important, because often students or patients will come to me and they're really struggling. That's sort of the number one thing that they come to me is, it's not that their symptoms are terrible, is that they're really stressed out because they're really not doing well in school, and their parents are on top of them, and their teachers are wondering and asking them to try harder. And often students actually don't know what they need or what can help them. And so they'll come to me and say, well, I'm failing. And I will say, okay, so let's go course by course and look at all the things that you haven't done and how we can make your school life better. And so we go through it. So sometimes you might say, I'm going to ask the student, well, what do you want me to do? What could help? And they'll be like, I don't know, because they actually don't know, because there's a real lack of education out there around mental illness and about what you can get in terms of accommodations. And also, students are often afraid. Remember, I talked about courage. They're afraid to ask for accommodations because they're worried that you think they're cheating, or that their friends think they're cheating because they're getting accommodations. And so they have to be able to talk to you openly and talk to their doctor and their families openly about, what it is that they need, so that they can actually ask for those things. And I've often written, in terms of communications, I've often written letters, which is very archaic, so sometimes it's emails, depending, to teachers and guidance counselors and vice principals when I can't reach them by phone. And you can also do the same, so that we can have a better communication plan for the student to support them.
Thank you. Andrea, the next question's for you. From a social perspective, and Susie touched on it a little earlier, what do you think as educators we can do to modify our language or our practices or even our dispositions to start to help remove the stigma that mental health might have attached to it?
I'll try and reiterate. So the first thing I just want to mention, about knowing what teachers can do, I do want to make an important point, is that there are so many caring, compassionate, and interested teachers in the system that I'm amazed every day. And I see them because my children have the the benefit of going to school in the public system. But you see wonderful teachers, all over. And I think there is a genuine interest to want to do well for their students, to get to know their students, to be able to help their students achieve. And in order to do that, education is key, right? We're all educators, and so education about mental health is also key. We need to be able to build our own learning opportunities, know what mental health is, what it's not, how it's connected to mental illness, but also learn how to recognize some of those early signs of mental health problems that students commonly have. So if we're thinking about anxiety or depression or other mood disorders, it's important to recognize some of the signs. We're not talking about becoming experts in the matter, but having a common understanding of how some of these difficulties will impact learning. And there are also some very effective strategies that educators can actually put into place every day to support those students who are struggling. So a student with anxiety may require some of those accommodations. And those are things that can be done with or without a diagnosis, right? So if a student is struggling with, getting to their exams, well, what are some of the things that we can do that Susie has talked about to help them reduce those anxiety levels? There are some everyday mental health strategies that we can put into place. Every day, 5 minutes, let's do sort of a quick talking circle, a quick check-in. How are things going? How are you feeling? Do maybe some mindfulness, but really try to build in those social emotional learning skills that we often hear about and talk about within your classrooms every day. So whether it's math, whether it's French, English, science, there are so many opportunities to help students do that. And this is what I've noticed in a lot of teachers that I've worked with and that I've interfaced with, is they're already doing a lot of this stuff. They're already caring for students and compassionate about their own interests. But, learning more about it is always helpful. I'd say it's also very important to learn about who is in the building that can help me help the student. So who is that social worker? When does that social worker come to my school? Because as Alan said, they're not there every day. But who else on the team can help us? We have resource teachers, we have guidance teachers, we have all kinds of very well-equipped professionals within our own schools. So who are those members of that team, right? So some schools will have well-being teams, or some schools will have health teams. So it's really finding out what that team is and how that team can support when a student is struggling. But also how that team can support to build collective capacity, to build our own knowledge about what that looks like in our schools. So, a lot of principals are also building their own skills around mental health, learning how to actually create a more mentally healthy environment for staff and students alike. And so that's where that sort of collective wisdom comes into play also. It's not just one educator, one student. It's really a whole school approach. And I know this isn't an unfamiliar term for most of you, but it's the same for a mentally healthy school. Mentally healthy classrooms depend on all parts of the system working together and knowing who can do what and knowing who we can turn to. And then beyond that, there are also some very wonderful external community mental health agencies that are there to support our students when really things aren't well, or when students might need some more therapy and some more supports. So it really is about building that system together, but learning together, and knowing that we're not alone in this. So I think I've answered all the questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, and springboarding off of that idea, Susie, this question is for you. And you may be aware that in the professional advisory, we say professionals also practice self-care. Recognize your stressors and know the resources that are available to you. So as a practicing teacher in your experience, what do you do and what might be helpful for others to consider as a teaching professional?
I'm going to get a bit personal here. I myself had to take a leave for a mental breakdown. I was just broken. I was broken. I experienced a series of family tragedies paired with autoimmune issues that I face on a daily basis. And I had to wrap my own head around the stigma that was towards me, right? What are colleagues saying about me? What are people thinking? Are they thinking I'm just taking time off for no reason? Because on the outside, I never appear like I was suffering, right? I was, you know, you have a smile on your face, you put on lipstick, and you know you're good to go. Everybody thinks you're happy when inside you're crying on the drive home. Or I know I would be sitting in front of my classroom and the kids are giving me answers, and all I kept thinking was, oh my God, my heart's beating so fast. I think my hand is numb, you know, just, and that those ruminating thoughts would just take over, and I wouldn't hear anything that was going on. And I know I described my specific events, but so many of us face those things, right? And as we get older, we face loss, needing to take care of parents, needing to take care of children, on top of taking care of all of these children in our room, and the planning, and the marking, and the paperwork, and the report cards, and I can go on and on and on and on and on. And you get to the end of the night, and you know, you're laying in bed, and you're just like, you can't shut down, right, until you break. So why is it that we wait until we break to get the help that we need? And why aren't these things in place to help us before we get to that point? Because we know how stressful of a profession this is. So I thought with this break that I took, or you know, to help myself into my journey towards healing is what I called it, I reached out and I did it through meditation and mindfulness. And I found Mindfulness Every Day, and it is a mindfulness-based stress reduction course specifically for educators. Heidi Bornstein is the founder, and she has been working with the TDSB for over 10 years. And if anyone is familiar with MBSR courses based off of Dr. John Kabat-Zinn's work, it teaches teachers how to understand and emotionally regulate what is going on in your own life, right? And through the lens of other educators as well. So it's usually a group course, and everyone sits and talks, and you figure out, you know, understanding, emotional training, compassion training, understanding empathy, anger, because we feel anger so often, right? And you're working with kids. It's hard to be patient all the time, especially when you're tired and going through your own life. So what do we do to calm that down? And this course, it's a 9-week course, it's incredible. I've taken it 3 times, and I'm actually training to be a facilitator in it because that's how much I believe in it. As soon as I started understanding myself and healing myself and understand what was going on with me, I was able to just organically translate that into the classroom. But then I thought, okay, there needs to be more, and that's when you start reaching out into resources and how do I create a mindful classroom? Because how do I fit meditation into everything else that I have to do? Well, you know what? I started doing it with my kids. And that's how I get my meditation in. You get to a point, I can have the students in grade 7s, so 12, 13-year-olds in complete silence for up to 13 minutes, where you could drop a pin in the room, and it was not easy. And it took training, and it took patience, but we got there, right? And it came with not only just doing the meditation, but how do I build mindfulness into my whole program, because everything can loop back to mindfulness. Every character that you read in a book. Mindfulness can come into math when they're struggling, when they're feeling that stress. How can we just take a break and take a breath? Create a growth mindset. That's mindfulness. That's everything that we can do. So taking that course, getting help for yourself first. The problem with that, again, that comes into barrier. How do we do that when it's expensive? Right? This course runs about $350. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody can commit to the 9 weeks. This is where I've kind of led myself into Operation Prefrontal Cortex. It is a nonprofit organization that was started by Director X. If anyone is familiar with him, he directs Drake's videos. You can call me on my cell phone. You'll know that for sure. Yeah. Right? Drake, Rihanna, Jay-Z. So he has quite a celebrity backing and is just so talented. So he was shot at one of the parties that he was throwing, and he thought, well, with the gun violence is just going insane. The violence that is happening within our youth, within our young in the city is out of control. What can I do to stop this? He turned to meditation to help himself, and he thought, we need to get this into our communities. We need to get this into every classroom, and we need to get this into the streets. So we are developing a program right now that will be piloted in September with 5 key schools, and we're trying to make meditation and mindfulness cool. We're trying to build it into pop culture, because that's what the at-risk youth are going to do. A lot of times mindfulness meditation right now is associated with, you know, people that are a bit older, yogis, you know, that, and that's not the demographic, like those aren't the people that they're looking up to. They're gonna look up to, you know, they want, especially at-risk youth, you know, you want that, the hip-hop culture, you want to tap into those kids, and so we're developing a program that's gonna help to do that, and it's going to start with training the teachers and making the training accessible, hopefully affordable if not free, and then once you tap into the teachers, it will translate into the kids, and develop a program that is going to be for everyone. And I think will help the village so that when you lift one, everyone rises, right? We teach the kids all the time. I know I just taught about Malala Yousafzai and educating girls. When you educate the girls, everyone rises. It's not making one better than the other. It's lifting everyone up. And teachers, we need to be lifted. We get banged around so much, so many expectations. And now with the political climate, don't even get me started. What's going to happen next year? We're afraid. And so what are we going to do to help take care of us so we can put our air mask on to take care of those little lives in our room? Sorry.
Thank you. And that reference you used, a few of us smiled. Dr. Chung referenced the same one, that when you're on an airplane, they say always put your own mask on before assisting another, right? That's where you're going with that.
That's right.
So the next question is actually for Dr. Chung and Andreanne. And that's talking about another constituent or another important group of people who have a role in all of this, which are the parents, families, guardians, or caregivers. Do you have any reflections on how we as teachers can work more closely with these folks in our combined effort to support student mental health? Dr. Chung.
Sure. As I've already mentioned, it does take a village, and family is so important. And I think I want to highlight the fact that for young people, family is not just their biological family, it often includes their friends. And so we have to remember that. And their family can really help support them in their journey to accessing care and getting better, recovering from mental health issues. As I've already said, it really takes courage, and often it takes someone holding your hand to get you where you need to go. Most of us have had the flu. Imagine if you had to navigate the healthcare system with the flu, and that's what my patients go through. Often their families are also unwell because we know that mental illness can be hereditary. And so the families are struggling, and they're struggling to access care for their young person. And so we have to keep all of that in mind when we work with the families, because when we try to tell them about what you think is going on or what their young person is struggling with, often the first thought that comes to their head is, oh, I caused this. Like I'm responsible. Like I'm the reason why my child is struggling. And so they deal with a lot of shame and stigma too when you talk to them about what's going on. And so it's very important to not label. So instead of saying what you think might be going on, it's important to describe what is actually happening, what you're seeing, and then try to problem solve together. So, you know, your son is not really coming to class. Can we talk a little bit about what might be keeping him from coming to school? What do you think is going on? And really trying to work together as a team to talk about what's going on. And again, remember that you have backup, right? You have lots of staff in your school community that Alan is going to bring on as he continues to advocate beyond high school to help you know what to do and how to help these families. So I think families is critical. I often have teenagers, and those of you who work with teenagers, you know they often think they're going to get better without any help. They're like, I don't know, I think I'm going to be fine, when they want to change their treatment or move away. And so I often have the discussion with the family around, you know, your mom and dad are the ones who take care of you when you're sick, so maybe we should hear what they think about you changing your treatment. And so we really have to remember that they are the advocates out there, and they're the ones that are supporting these students. And so it's very important to make sure that we bring them on board as part of the team.
That was really good. That was very well said. I agree, of course. I mean, I don't have much more to add aside from the fact that, yeah, it's I mean, incredibly difficult to hear about, you know, your child suffering or your child, you know, falling ill, and taking that news, you know, well, it's difficult, right? We can all acknowledge that. And so some of the things that we can do in schools is to support parents to, you know, obviously try to be non-judgmental about what's happening, not blame the parents. You know, it's obviously, you know, sometimes we have students who are disruptive and very difficult. You know, if we're talking about students who are a little bit, you know, very excitable, and it can be frustrating, right, for educators. But when we contextualize it, you know, these kids are like this all the time, right? And parents are also sometimes frustrated. And so we have to come from, you know, the same approach and understand that we're working as a team, right? Helping parents understand that we're there to support students. And it's scary, right, for parents to expose sometimes what's happening at home, so we try and, you know, maintain a certain front, but sometimes we really need that support, right? Parents need to be supported by the whole school system. Something else that can be helpful is helping parents understand what those pathways to care are. So, okay, now we know that that a student or a child is suffering or has identified some kind of problem. What are my next steps? What else is going to happen? How else is the student going to be helped at school? And I know a lot of educators already do that with IEPs and all kinds of processes. But when it comes to mental health, what else can we put in place? So those are the kinds of things that could be helpful for parents to know about, but also knowing that there is that team there to support them and the student. I think that also offering parents the opportunity to engage in conversations about mental health at school, about student mental health at school, whether it's through evening forums or even learning about mental health, right? Inviting them to also learn a little bit more about what it means and what it is and what some of those early signs might be. Parents don't always necessarily have those tools either, right? So bringing them together to learn a little bit more about that. And also recognizing, you know, that we're a multicultural society with people who have distinctly diverse backgrounds, and so recognizing that whole point about culture and identity and how critical it is for us to include that in the definition of well-being and wellness, right? So, you know, these are a lot of these are some of the questions that come up, and for parents, you know, we want to destigmatize the conversation about mental illness and mental health in general, but we have to do that in a very, you know, respectful way as well. So those are some of the things that come to mind.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just add on to something? Yeah, so just the part about education and working with parents, I think that's also really important as well because, like Andrea said, we're very multicultural, and we also have a lot of people who grew up in cultures that weren't as accepting of mental health as the one that we currently live in. So I think education also starts with the parents, especially those who obviously are. There are, as a matter of fact, there are cultures out there that think that mental health is just an excuse, right? Which is obviously not true, but for those parents, that is what they believe in. And I think the education starts with them in changing the way they perceive mental health as a serious problem. And I think if the parents are on board with us as part of our team, then that will help us have support for the students from at school and at home. So on both fronts, and that will make a huge impact.
I agree with everyone, and see that opening up the lines of communication, but how do we do that with a population that doesn't speak English? Mm-hmm. Because then that becomes an issue where I know from my own grandparents, when they never went to parent-teacher interviews or they wouldn't go to school because they were embarrassed. Well, I don't speak the language, so I'm not going to go. Why? They're going to, oh, no, and I feel bad, and no. So they just don't involve themselves. So how can we bring them in and make them feel comfortable? I know I tell my students all the time, you know what, it doesn't matter that your mom doesn't speak English or your dad, just have them come in. You know what, tell them that I just want to shake their hand. And I want them to see my face because it's important for them to see where their child spends their day. We can just show them your desk, and some of the work that you've done, and that automatically makes them feel more comfortable. Now, this is where we can tap into technology. We have a resource called RIO, Remote Interpretation Ontario. You can call this company. You can tell them what language your parent speaks in, and a translator will sit on the phone with you and have a conversation with the parents. That automatically puts parents at ease. There's nothing getting lost in translation, and it just creates this open line of communication, so you can say, you know what, I'm worried. You know, is your child sleeping? You know, are they eating before they come to school? You can ask those simple questions that lead to mental health issues, lead to not focusing, lead to memory, and all of those things. There's also this incredible app called Talking Points, and it's free, which is also nice. And what it does is that you connect all parents onto your app. You can then text with them. So I will text to my parent in English, I pick the language, and it will translate it into their language, and they receive the text in their language. There's a teacher in my school who actually didn't have any parent-teacher interviews because she communicates with her parents so often, they didn't have any questions. And, you know, it also comes to a point where you can monitor homework, you can monitor behavior, and then, you know, that's when then you can take it a step further to say, well, if it's too much, it's a great lines to say, can we meet? And then put translators in place so that the village can come together. And technology helps.
Sorry. Thank you so much on behalf of Council for your insights, for sharing personal stories, for your enthusiasm to champion this great cause. And I think I'd be remiss to say that everyone here is taking home a tidbit here and there, has written down those free things that they want. If they're a true teacher, they always like the free stuff for sure. So I'd like to thank you for being here today, and I really appreciate your insights and your expertise and the additional perspectives that you have brought here as a panel together. Both a professional and a community can support students' mental health and well-being. And there's a famous royal, and you may be able to guess who it was, who said, 2 heads are better than one when it comes to mental health. And as you look around the room here today, I think, and including the 235,000 licensed OCTs that we have, imagine the difference that we can all make together. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much. Well done.
Well, that was interesting, informative, thought-provoking, so thank you for that. And I'd like to invite everybody again to give our panelists and our moderators another round of applause. You're welcome to stay if you'd like to sit, or you can stay there if you want, whatever you like.
I might end up talking too much. I better sit down.
So thank you. Right now, I'd like to invite Council Chair Nicole Van Woudenberg up to the podium again to talk about the work of College Council. Do you want to move it up again, or you okay?
Should be okay. Yeah. So hello everyone again, and as I've been introduced, I'm Nicole Van Woudenberg, and I am the chair of College Council. And 2018 was a transition year for us, with the conclusion of 7th Council and the inauguration of 8th Council. So, and there's our wonderful group of council members here. You may recall that last spring there was a council election, and promoting the council elections among our licensed teaching professionals proved to be very fruitful, because we had 69 candidates nominated to run for the elected positions. Although our voter turnout was low, the interest from Ontario certified teachers to serve on council is very promising. Self-regulation is enhanced by the willingness of OCTs to serve their profession in the public interest. So in 2018, those who concluded their distinguished service with us on council include appointed members Marie-Claude Yakov in March, Jane Ishibashi in August, and Marie-Therese Hokayem and James Knopp in September. An elected member, Jennifer Stewart, also left council in February. In September, Mary Ellen Gucciardi and Jerry O'Reilly were appointed by Council as elected members to fill 2 vacant positions. In addition, Jonathan Rose was appointed to Council in February for a 3-year term. The terms of service for appointed members Colleen Landers and Bill Petrie and Tom Potter were also extended. And we are very grateful for the dedication and contribution of those who left, and we welcome our new colleagues. L'autoréglementation est un privilège. Les 37 membres du Conseil en tiennent compte et gouvernent la profession dans l'intérêt du public, avec le plus grand souci de transparence et de responsabilité. Leurs décisions orientent la profession enseignante en Ontario. You will agree that nothing is more important than the safety and well-being of Ontario students. This is why Council approved a series of recommendations to the Ministry of Education to amend the Ontario College of Teachers Act. For example, we approved expanding the list of acts that would result in mandatory revocation, including touching of a sexual nature by a teacher of a student's genitals, anus, breasts, and buttocks. Council also approved the college's professional advisory to support students with mental health concerns and an updated version of our advisory on duty to report. This year, the 7th Council Governance Committee initiated an independent review of the college's governance structure and processes. Governance Solutions, Inc. was commissioned after a public request for proposal. The report was presented to Council in November, and the government simultaneously introduced Bill 48, the Safe and Supportive Classrooms Act, 2018, which includes proposed governance changes. Both were part of our Council discussions. In the summer, the college held focus group sessions with licensed teaching professionals and the public. Why are we doing this? Well, we conducted these sessions to gauge their opinion on a number of college initiatives and communication products. For example, we discussed OCT's professional development, the college's branding, and preferred topics for future professional advisories. We conducted these sessions in English and French in Kingston, Ottawa, Kitchener, London, Timmins, and Toronto. These cities were chosen to reflect different geographical regions, demographics, and languages. The feedback helps the college's staff and governing council act with increased efficiency. In the fall, Council engaged in the important task of reviewing the college's mission, vision, and strategic priorities. They serve as a roadmap. Through participation of council members and senior staff, our mission and vision continue to be clearly tied to the mandate. Our revised strategic priorities continue to foster public confidence and trust. And we are delighted this year to recognize 3 accomplished and impressive teacher candidates with our annual Ontario College of Teachers Scholarship Program. The recipient for the Joseph W. Atkinson Scholarship for Excellence in Teacher Education is Taylor Crawford from Oshawa. She's a teacher candidate at Queen's University. The recipient of the Ontario College of Teachers Scholarship Primary Junior or Junior Intermediate is Sarah Salt from Campbellville. She's a teacher candidate at Brock University. And the recipient of the Ontario College of Teachers Scholarship Intermediate Senior is Luke Sozak from Georgetown. He's a teaching candidate at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. And let me conclude by saying that council members and staff are highly dedicated to the mandate of the college. I extend my sincere gratitude for everyone's professionalism and collaborative efforts. we continue to serve in the public interest and set the direction for the teaching profession in Ontario. Thank you and merci.
Thank you, Nicole. I would now like to invite a selection of council committee chairs up to provide an update of their activities from 2018. So first up, we have Committee Chair Colleen Landers, who will be reporting on the activities of the Accreditation Committee. Colleen, please.
Good evening and bonjour. I am Colleen Landers, and I am the chair of the Accreditation Committee. I am a registered nurse and a medical device reprocessing technician. I have served as a trustee for the Northeastern Catholic District School Board for 30 years. I was appointed to the College Council in December of 2015. The current committee of accreditation includes elected council members, Paige Bennett, the vice chair, Susan Elliott-Johns, Jacqueline Carsemeyer, Rebecca Forte, Mary Ann Mowad, appointed members Jean-Luc Bernard, Vincent Rinaldi, and Tom Potter. Accreditation Director Rock Gallion and staff provide excellent support to this committee. Without the staff, it would be almost impossible for us to do our job. The college's accreditation committee ensures high-quality programs to prepare Ontario's teachers. We do so through program review and accreditation. As you can imagine, a rigorous review process assures the public that Ontario teacher education programs meet requirements set out in regulation. New programs are reviewed before they can be offered to students, and existing programs are reviewed every 7 years to confirm that they continue to meet standards and requirements. In the review, panel members examine documents submitted by the program provider. We also visit the sites of these programs. We interview program faculty and stakeholders, such as students, associate teachers, etc. We examine materials and review facilities and resources. Members of the public are always provided with an opportunity to offer feedback about the programs under review. After the review, the panel develops its report and sets out its recommendations and the evidence it has considered. The committee considers the information in the panel's report and issues an accreditation decision. When a teacher education program is accredited with conditions, the program provides the accreditation committee a plan for satisfying those conditions, and we follow up. That they send annual reports that describe their progress. Already in the mandate of 8th Council, the Accreditation Committee has addressed applications from providers to add new programs, which is under Section 19 in the Reg Act, and to substantially change other programs, which is Section 21. Initial accreditations, renewals, and additions to programs necessitate a 4-person panel, including one elected and one appointed member of council, one of whom has to be a member of the Accreditation Committee, one roster member, and one institution nominee. Typically, the review involves site visits, interviews, deliberation, and report writing. Since the beginning of 7th Council, this process has been streamlined from feedback from both the panels and the providers. Substantial changes to program must be reviewed by a subcommittee of the Accreditation Committee and are brought to the full committee for decision rendering or the possibility of striking a full panel. In order to provide a modern and streamlined review process for accreditation, the committee and staff continuously improve resources and practices. In 2018, resources were refreshed to reflect regulatory changes and program enhancements. Training is provided to the committee members through topics brought forward by the committee members. Staff incorporate some of the training into meetings using panel presentations and documents, so members get real-life documents to assist in understanding knowledge required to perform this work. The Accreditation Committee benefits from a job-embedded training model. Staff facilitates timely professional learning in preparation for the rendering of decisions. As an example, when a panel identified gaps in the report recommendations, Arrangements were made to have policy input and a legal counsel presentation prior to the decision being rendered. Thank you. If there are any questions, and merci.
Thank you, Colleen. Up next is Committee Chair Irene Dembeck, who will be giving a report from the Fitness to Practice Committee. Irene?
Good evening and bonsoir. I am Irene Dembeck. I am the chair of the Fitness to Practice Committee. I am an elementary school teacher with the Sudbury Catholic District School Board. I teach all grades in one class from junior kindergarten to grade 6 in a very rural school where all the students are of Aboriginal descent, and yes, the black flies are out. I was first elected to the College Council in 2009. The committee also includes elected council members Diane Ballantyne, Rebecca Fort, John Hamilton, Sarah Nguyen, Alicia Nunn, Stéphane Vallée, Mary Ellen Giacardi, Nicola Puadiak, and appointed members Jean-Luc Bernard, Marie-Thérèse Hokoyam, Godwin Ifedi, Jane Eshibashi, Marlene Marwa, Tom Parter, and Jonathan Rose. The Fitness to Practice Committee hears matters and determines if a member's physical or mental condition makes them unfit to carry out professional responsibilities, or if a member's teaching certificate should be made subject to terms, conditions, and limitations. We do hold hearings, but as you may understand, these hearings are not open to the public in accordance with the Ontario College of Teachers Act. We are different than the Discipline Committee, who holds public hearings on matters related to alleged professional misconduct and/or incompetence against college members. I am sure you are aware of the outcomes of their decisions by reading the Blue Pages section of our magazine, Professionally Speaking, Pour Parler Profession. Our committee makes decisions by considering the evidence related to the allegations and submissions of the college and the member. If we find a member to be incapacitated, we may direct the CEO and registrar of the college to revoke the member's teaching certificate, suspend the certificate for up to 2 years, or impose terms, conditions, or limitations on their certificate. Thank you, and if there is any questions, I'll try my best to answer them.
Thank you, Irene. Now I'd like to invite Tom Potter, Chair of the Governance Committee, to provide his committee's report. And we'll talk about how to get questions in again in a moment.
Bonjour and hello. My name is Tom Potter. I'm Chair of the Governance Committee. And I started my career in teaching. I was an English teacher with Waterloo Catholic School Board for an abbreviated period, 3 years. And since then, I have held several positions in sales and marketing, human resources, and organizational development in the pharmaceutical industry. So although I began my career as a teacher, my career has been spent mostly in industry. I was appointed to College Council in 2015. On the Governance Committee, we have members Irene Dembeck, who you just heard from, Tim Gernstein, John Hamilton, Sarah Nguyen, and appointed members Jonathan Rose. We just lost an appointed member, a woman, Rana Warsh, who lives in Windsor, who has a consulting business, and her business has interfered with her ability to serve on council, but we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge her contribution to this committee. So what is it we do? Well, we offer guidance. We offer guidance on governance issues such as risk assessment, evaluation of council effectiveness, and council member development, succession planning, and transition effectiveness. And just a quick word about risk assessment. These are not the risks that one might normally think of in terms of financial risks. These are risks mostly related to the reputation and the value of trust that the public places in the profession. In 2018, the committee focused on the transition between the 7th and 8th councils. As you know, every 3 years there's a new council formed, and about half the membership of the council is renewed via an election of members of the profession. And an important goal of the college was to increase participation in the election for the 8th council. And so we monitored the results of the outreach and member engagement initiatives that the college undertook to encourage voter participation and engagement in the election process. And while it's clear that we made some improvement, it's also very clear that we have a long ways to go with a 3.4% participation rate. The committee approved a 2-day orientation program for the incoming council members to prepare them for their governance roles on council and committees. We also proposed committee memberships based on a candidate's interests, skills, and competencies for the inaugural 8th council meeting that was held last July. Strategic planning continued to be a focus for the committee in 2018. We undertook the regular process of updating the college's strategic priorities. We worked with an external consultant, and we had a 2-day strategic planning session for council members and for senior staff. And the committee proposed a revised plan based on input from this session. In November, Council approved its new 2018 to 2023 strategic plan, including the new strategic priorities. As you heard earlier, the committee also undertook an independent review of the college governance with a focus on corporate governance. Working with Governance Solutions, Inc., the review involved consultation, document and best practice review, and an examination of ways to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of key governance practices and structures. The 37 recommendations from the final report were received by Council in December, and we are currently undergoing the work of dealing with all of those recommendations. And again, if you have questions about the Governance Committee's work, I would be happy to address those during the question and answer period. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Tom. So before I move on, I just want to remind you that we are collecting questions for the Q&A that will happen later after a few more reports. So you can submit those in writing in the drop boxes you see around the room. Or if you're listening in at home on live streaming, you can submit the questions by visiting pollev.com/OCTOEEO or by downloading the Poll Everywhere app on your smartphone or tablet. Enter OCTOEEO to join the presentation and submit your question. And Jacqueline's just eager to get up here. And now, last but not least, I would invite Committee Chair Jacqueline Karsmeyer to report on the activities of the Investigation Committee.
Good evening and bonsoir. I'm Dr. Jacqueline Karsmeyer, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as chair of the Investigation Committee. I'm also, for the time being, a special education consultant with the Toronto District School Board supporting kindergarten to grade 12 students and teachers in 20 schools. Je suis entrée au Conseil de l'Ordre en 2016 pour combler un poste vacant et j'ai ensuite été élue en 2018 pour un mandat de 3 ans. Avec moi, les membres élus du comité d'enquête, so along with myself, the elected members of the committee are Tim Gernstein, Aaron Glenn, Shannon Marcus, Jerry O'Reilly et Stephen Zimmerman. Et les membres nommés, appointed members, sont Michelle Miner-Seal, et Bob Cooper. Stephen Zimmerman est également le vice-président du comité. Stephen Zimmerman is vice chair of the committee. Integral to our work are the expertise and support of staff. The main role of our committee is to investigate complaints about college members related to professional misconduct, incompetence, or incapacity. Those three key areas: misconduct, incompetence, or incapacity. In a nutshell, the committee's panels decide how to deal with complaints. We can, for example, resolve the issue at the investigation committee level or refer a matter to discipline or fitness to practice, committees that you've heard from prior to this. When a case is deemed suitable and the parties agree, the college uses what we refer to as voluntary complaint resolution, the key word being voluntary. Complaint resolution can be a very effective alternative to extended investigation. Overall, in 2018, our committee disposed of 386 complaints. Current statistics for 2018 recorded over 1,500 members of the public and profession contacted the college to raise issues about college members. The great majority of the issues raised were resolved appropriately at the school or the school board levels. The others were addressed by the college and our committee. With over 235,000 members, it is essential to note that there is a tiny minority of members who are brought forth to the investigation committee. Our college membership includes teachers, consultants, vice principals, principals, supervisory officers, and directors of education. We are named the Ontario College of Teachers. We have many members. The vast majority of members serve within the Ontario public education system. In addition, some members work in the private school system or at sites such as museums, hospitals, outdoor education centers. Our skills are diverse and generalizable. The parameters and processes of the work of our committee are well articulated in the Colleges Act. This is a very brief overview of the investigation committee's work. Further information is available on the website, and as with my colleagues, we are available to answer your questions. Thank you. Merci bien. Bonsoir.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for the investigation committee report. And the reports you've just heard are highlights from the council committees in 2018. So now I would like to invite College Deputy Registrar Joe Jameson to provide us with a report on the college's operational activities. Joe, please.
Thank you, Laurie. I'm feeling a little far away from everybody. Not quite on the edge yet. There we go. Thank you, Laurie. Good evening and bonsoir. My name is Joe Jameson, and as noted, I'm the Deputy Registrar here at the College of Teachers. Like our 235,000 certified qualified members, I too am an Ontario certified teacher, and I'm proud of it. In the next few minutes, I'd like to highlight some of the college's achievements in 2018. But first, I'd like to provide some context. Describing what we do as a regulator is relatively easy. Explaining it, not quite as easy, but perhaps even more important. Our mandate is set out in Ontario law. In short, we do four things. We set high ethical and practice standards for Ontario teachers. We license them to work in Ontario schools. We accredit programs that enable people to become teachers and that help them stay up to date in their professional practice. And we receive and resolve complaints against members. As the context in which we work and the learning conditions evolve, we hold what we do against a standard that is higher, the standard of why. Our why, or the reason for our actions and initiatives, is predicated on protecting and serving the public interest. At the very heart of that is student well-being and student safety. Protecting students guides our work. we hope it also builds public confidence in our organization and in the teaching profession itself. In 2018, for example, the college asked the government to amend the law. We wanted a broader definition of sexual abuse so we could remove the teaching licenses of those who abuse students. We also supported the idea of a program to provide funds for therapy and counseling for student victims of sexual abuse by our members. Beyond that, we intervened in a case at Canada's Supreme Court to protect student privacy. We wanted to legally establish what constitutes acceptable and professional conduct between teachers and their students. We have sharpened our focus on risk identification and mitigation, one of the strategic priorities we set this past year. To that end, we're taking a close look at those areas of our work where we can anticipate risks early and intervene appropriately. Through regular reviews, we can mitigate risks and improve our efficiency and effectiveness in all areas of our work. For example, the college's governance committee commissioned an independent review of the governance structure itself. Our council will consider the report in early 2019. It recommends, among other things, creating smaller governance boards with external committees and rosters to carry out the statutory work of committees. The college also took several steps in 2018 to support teachers' initial and continuing education and develop policy for additional qualifications and accreditation. We met with the Ministry of Education to review feedback practices and proposed changes in regulation. We held design workshops for developers of additional qualification or AQ courses. We developed AQ guidelines involving Inuktitut elders and people from the deaf and hard of hearing community. We met with prospective teachers in their first and second years of initial teacher education in their programs at Ontario's Faculties of Education. The college renewed accreditation of initial teacher education programs at Redeemer University College, York University, Tyndale University College, the University of Ontario Institute of Technology, and Laurentian University. As well, we reviewed and approved requests for substantial changes to programs at the Schulich School of Education at Nipissing University and the Faculty of Education at the University of Windsor. By meeting face-to-face with members, parents, and stakeholders, we identify and address potential issues early. And we learn as we go, from other regulators, for example, from parents and our members. We shared case studies and best practice information with other regulators at our Inspiring Public Confidence Conference, with the intention of improving our practice and mitigating risks. And we heard from parents and members in a series of focus groups in the summer of 2018. On their advice, we created a professional advisory, the one we've spoken about tonight, supporting students' mental health. In November, our council approved the document, which has been mailed to all 235,000 members and has been supported by events in 7 different communities with mental health agencies, educators, and advocates. The advisory was created after consulting with experts and education stakeholders. It provides a framework for thinking, talking, and acting that honors an educator's professional judgment while helping them help students at risk. As I mentioned, managing risk was one of the 3 strategic priorities our council set in November for the next 5 years. We are also focusing on strengthening transparency and accountability and improving engagement with our stakeholders. We've refreshed our communication materials in print and electronically. Simple, clear language fosters better understanding. And new social media tools let us talk directly to people, seek out their thoughts, and answer their questions quickly. We believe that being open and accountable will increase public confidence. Working together through our council's leadership and staff diligence, along with the insights of our colleagues in education and in the self-regulation world, we can make learning richer and learning environments safer for Ontario students. We value the public interest, honesty, integrity, diversity, and inclusivity. We value quality, professionalism. We value quality, professionalism, fiscal responsibility, effectiveness, and teamwork. I value the passion and commitment of people who puts students first. Just ask me why. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, for sharing those many highlights from 2018. So now we begin our question and answer session hosted by Joe and Nicole. So I'm going to repeat what I've said in the past, though a number of written questions have been collected since the beginning of today's meeting from those in the room, but also those streaming from home. The questions will be displayed on the screens. Duplicate questions or questions outside the scope of the college legislative mandate will not appear. So again, I repeat myself, if anyone has any additional questions, you can write them down and put them in the boxes around the room. Or if you're viewing live streaming, you can also submit questions online by visiting, you guessed it, pollev.com/OCTOEEO. Or by downloading the Poll Everywhere app on your smartphone or tablet. Enter OCTOEEO to join the presentation and submit your question. Again, to ensure we share these questions accurately with everyone on the screen, please provide us with written questions only. We will try to get through as many questions as we can. Any question we cannot get to will be answered and posted online after today's meeting. So let's get started. Thank you, everyone. Oh, no. So let's get started. That's you guys. There you go.
That would have been a record question and answer. Period. There we go.
So I do actually have a question. Should we start with this one, or do you want me to start with this one?
How about the one we have?
Okay.
That gives us time to think about this.
Okay. All right, so bear with me. It is a bit longer, so I'm going to read it out for you. In order to support student mental health, I believe we need to value and develop self-management and self-awareness capacities in our students. However, in order for this to happen, we need teachers who value and are developing those same capacities in themselves. We need to develop educators who are emotionally and socially intelligent, as well as intellectually and academically knowledgeable. My question is, would the college find value in considering the benefits of mindful awareness training for educators as a basis for developing these skills with an integrated framework that promotes well-being, and would it consider helping individual teachers, and especially young trainee teachers, to be able to deeply value the importance of their role and to help them develop practical ways to sustain themselves? Ooh, mood lighting.
So, Nicole, thank you for that question. And we have talked about that tonight on the panel from the perspective that we would certainly believe that mental health is important for everyone who is in our communities, both teachers and students, and that we all have to be mindful of modeling appropriate wellness and destigmatizing environments. The other thing I'm mindful of is that when we're talking about the mental well-being of a teacher, that we have a mandate area at the college, and that although we acknowledge and validate and support that it is important for teachers to put on their own mask, there are employers, there are federations, there are their colleagues at the site, and other groups that are more intimately connected to their daily practice that would be well positioned to support that, which we would support them supporting. So the short answer is yes, we need teachers who are at their best, and we believe that they should reach out, and that there are many of our partners that can fulfill that.
So what's the most important challenge facing the college in the near future? I would always say on our radar is serving in the public interest and maintaining that public confidence. That is really the underlying mandate of having the Ontario College of Teachers as a self-regulator. We are at arm's length distance of the government. Our focus is to remain serving in the public interest so that those parents who take their children to school every single morning can feel very confident letting go of their hands, sending their teenagers to high school, and knowing that they have high caliber, vetted, credentialed individuals that teach their children every single day. So I think this is always on our radar. It remains even as we go through changes that are coming down the road. It's always that keeping that focus on maintaining public trust and confidence.
Thanks, Nicole. I would add that the College of Teachers is positioned the same with the other self-regulatory bodies within the province, and I think that there is a crisis in confidence in professions that self-regulate themselves, generally speaking. So that means for us that we have to up our game with respect to the transparency in our work, the messaging to the public, and the integrity in the way we make decisions so that the public confidence in our profession, as it needs to be in all of the professions, the health professions and our other colleges, to be maintained and encouraged. Coincidentally, that's why we call our conference Inspiring Public Confidence, because the regulators and the people who are gathered there, that's what it's about. We believe that inspiring public confidence is higher than just protecting the public interest, and that's where we'd like to go. I would also add, because I know that there's only one, but I want to add a second one. And I think as we go forward, especially during our governance review, it's important that our members understand the role and mandate and parameters in which we act as a regulatory body, and that our members would see relevance in what we do from the perspective of enabling the public to see all of us as a collective profession in a way that's inspiring and is worthy of the public trust.
Do you want to take that one?
I would. So that is really a continuation of the earlier question about the support of the mental health of teachers. Again, as an agency that is from mandate out of law to serve and protect the public interest, that's why the advisory is called Supporting Student Mental Health. But they're not mutually exclusive of each other. A healthy teacher is going to be able to be more present, more effective, and more resilient when working in our schools. So how does the college directly support the mental health of teachers? I would say that through the advisory that we released and through the embedding of that advisory in initial teacher education programs and our outreach programs, we're planting the seed. We might not be the solution, but we're planting the seed, just as Susie said earlier, that don't wait until, I wish I could quote you exactly, Susie, don't wait until you break, but when you're up here, that's the time to do that. And I would hope that that advisory is that little nudge that might plant that seed to our 235,000 members, that this is something that needs to be on your radar.
So could we have a compulsory guidance course once per week for grades 1 through 12 using a decreed guidance specialist? So I think we can speak to this question from our mandate at the college if it pertains specifically to additional qualifications courses. So it wouldn't be necessarily the delivery or the once per week that it would address, but it would address more along the lines of content. And just quickly to trace back to some of the comments that Colleen, as the chair of accreditation, was mentioning, there is a whole process in regulation with regards to when cyclical reviews happen. You may be aware that back in 2015, we enhanced to the enhanced teacher education program, which now creates a 4th semester. This is all, it didn't just happen out of the blue. It all happens through consultation through recommendations to know that the teaching profession is an ever-evolving profession. And so when members themselves or when there are outside experts that are consulted with that come up with a need, for example, in this case, this may be a need, then that would be directed to an area such as the additional qualifications in order to possibly develop courses. Joe, do you want to add anything?
No, got right on. So one of the challenges about not being able to clarify the questions as they come in is to try to figure out the context yourself based on some assumptions. So I'm assuming that this member of the college is concerned about the college gathering physical or mental health information on our members, and how do we access that information and what do we do with that information. And I can assure the membership that we don't collect physical and mental health data on someone. We don't have access to that. There may be in a member's intersection with the college, should they be in a fitness to practice or a disciplinary stream, that that might be something that enters into that realm of investigation. But that would be the only time, and that would be an exception, and it would be with consent as well. And the chair of fitness to practice is nodding. So assuming that's what the question is, that would be the answer that I'd provide right now.
Irene, did you want to add anything?
Just mention that it's a closed hearing, so it's not accessible to
Right, and just to reiterate that Irene in her presentation indicated that it was a closed hearing, and that goes to protect the privacy of the member as well. Oh, I'm going to read this question out. How can we support the mental health of non-Canadian students, for example, international students who attend boarding schools who often do not have counseling staff? Often students at international schools are not minors. How do we help these young adults? What resources are available? So maybe I'll start off and then pass it on to you, Joe. And so this is a general question that the panel very well gave different ideas about as well. And this is difficult when we think of a we as the role at the college, because this doesn't technically fall under our mandate here at the college. However, we know that when we work with students as a professional teacher, we have resources in our public system which may not be accessible when we're into a private system. However, the community at large has resources that are available that teachers who may be working in this environment or working with students in this kind of setting could reach out to the community supports that are available. And I know that our student Alan even mentioned the Kids Helpline, the support lines that are available to those students as well.
Thank you, and I would add 2 links back to our professional advisory. One of the things that I think is very effective with the professional advisory is the way that it acts to be a tool for self-reflection and asking questions. And one of the questions in the advisory is, am I, and I'm paraphrasing it because I don't have it in front of me, but am I attuned to the special needs or the needs that might be particular to marginalized groups, to groups that are on, that might be more vulnerable? And we cite a few different examples there. So perhaps an international student who may have, English might not be their first language, or culture might be different. That's something that we should have extra attention to as OCTs. The second part is what you said about the connection. And the last part of the advisory asks OCTs to reflect on, do they know who in their community, usually through their administrator, that they can be the connector as the Tier 1 intervention with students who are struggling.
Just wanted to say that the mental health panel was very strong, wished it was accessible on the YouTube channel. So that's great feedback for us to hear. And I see Kathy nodding that it will be posted on the It will be posted on the website, so you can rewatch it to your heart's content. What can be done about student violence against teachers and other students in the classroom?
Sure. Again, I would start by reflecting on what the mandate of the Ontario College of Teachers is. And these questions are of concern, and they, of course, are valid with respect to having a healthy classroom environment and teachers that are respected and protected. If I had to slice it in two, I would say that I would refer to the Professional Advisory on Bullying, which was one that was released prior to our last one. And it talks about how an OCT is an effective intervener and manager of bullying, both in the classroom and the school at large. With respect to student violence against teachers, again, I would point out that there are other agencies in a teacher's life that question and that advocacy role would appropriately fall onto them. Of course, the college position would be is it's completely inappropriate and unacceptable. Our tools are with respect to our mandate, I should say, is with respect to the protection of the public interest. So if a teacher was asking me that directly, I would suggest that it would be their employer and their federation that they need to approach to have that advocacy and protection work done.
So if you had more resources, where would you want it to go? I'm not sure if this is pertaining to the theme of the mental health. I'm going to make an assumption that it's I don't know. This is a hard one because I don't know if it pertains to the college. I have a list if there is a wish for more resources at the college, but so I find it difficult to answer. Do you find it hard to answer?
Well, I will answer it as if it is a global question. And I think it is consistent with what we talked about at the council meeting today in depth. And I think that the resources that address how we can have fair, timely, judicial procedures that protect the public interest while respecting the fairness of the member in her or his engagement with it would be an excellent investment in resources at our college. Thank you.
Is that it? Well, we definitely appreciate the thank you. I don't know if there were any other, were the questions from the boxes also filtered through or, okay. Well, we are grateful that we are actually ahead of schedule.
5 minutes.
So I'd like to take this opportunity, and I'll toss it to you for a final word, Joe, but I'm very appreciative to see members that have been able to come. I know that there are members watching through the live stream as well. We try to make these meetings as accessible as possible so that the understanding of the mandate at the college can be communicated on various different levels throughout our broadcasting techniques. So we appreciate everyone's engagement in the interest. We know we highlighted the main activities and the core activities of the college. And should you ever have any future questions, we're only a phone call away. There's very knowledgeable staff that can provide feedback to you and can provide you with direction and advice if you ever find yourself that you need to report or whether you are just seeking information on the college mandate in general. And on behalf of all the council members that are here, thank you for your participation as well. It's nice for members that come to these meetings to see faces of who's actually in the room making the decisions and setting the direction for the college. And I'd be remiss not to thank staff. They are absolutely amazing in supporting the work that we do. And Joe, I'll pass it to you if you want to say a few words.
Nicole, I think you have said it all.
Sorry, Joe.
And all I would add is thank you.
So So thank yous all around. So thank you for those who are here, and thank you for the thoughtful questions. Joe and Nicole, thank you for facilitating those answering those questions. I hate getting my picture taken. Based on what we've heard today, obviously 2018 was an eventful and successful year for the college. So once again, I'd like to thank today's participants, including our panelists, speakers and attendees, both in person and those online. Before we conclude, I have one final announcement. The college's Margaret Wilson Library on the 14th floor is hosting an open house. So please visit to see the full range of free services available, including resources for members. And with that, the Ontario College of Teachers annual meeting of members is now adjourned. Thank you, and we'll see you next year.